Hi everyone, welcome to MetalNet. My guest today has played in a lot of notable and well-loved bands, including the Alice Cooper Band, Flotsam and Jetsam, Fifth Angel, as well as House of Lords. He's also a drummer, a music exec, a producer. He's pretty much done everything you could ever want to do as a musician. Welcome, Ken Mary. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm doing great. How are you, Sarah?
I'm doing great as well. Thank you so much for being on MetalNet.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so there's a lot to talk about with your career, and I always like to start at the beginning. And something that was really interesting about you is you started your career like literally as a teenager. How old were you when you started as a musician?
Well, a professional musician, I was actually 15 years old, where you actually started, performing and getting paid for it and saving money. And I think it was a little bit easier back then. My high school band was a band. It actually ended up being Fifth Angel. We had a different name back then, but we were playing high schools and we were making, back in the 80s, we were making like $500 a show, which, back in that time, that's probably like making 1,500 or 2,000 today. So, we took it very seriously. We bought a ton of equipment. We had this massive light show and this huge truck, and we had a road crew that traveled with us. I mean, it was almost like we were, some pro level band, and we weren't yet, but we always planned on being a pro level band, and eventually we did become a pro level band. So,
How long had you been playing by that time? Like by the time you were 15, how many years had you put in on drums?
I'd been playing about 4 years at that point, but it was something that I think for me, I've talked to a lot of different drummers, and there are some drummers that seem to have sort of a natural aptitude, and then there are other drummers that really had to work hard. Now, I'm not saying I didn't work hard. I mean, I loved playing, but so for me, it was never work. I just always really enjoyed it. I never felt like practice was working for me. And I loved playing, but in terms of how much I did seem like I had some natural aptitude for it. I mean, there was something that was just sort of innate, and for me to learn things very quickly, it seemed like it was easier for me than maybe some of the people that were around me that were trying to play drums, I guess. I mean, that's the only thing I could say. I think I had a love for it. And also that I think was combined with a little bit of natural aptitude, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and is your family musical at all, or were you the first musician in your family?
Well, my family has a really weird story. I'm first generation American. My family, my mother was 5 years old and was escaping Poland in World War II. My grandfather. I mean, the stories that I have growing up, I mean, they had to eat grass to survive. My grandfather saw people in his village lined up and shot. And, I mean, it's just, World War II was a horrible, horrible time. And the United States, pretty much saved my family. I think that there's a musical undercurrent in my family, but there's not there's not any musicians per se that are in my family. And again, I think, coming to this country, it was kind of like my mother was very cognizant of the opportunity of America. And she really pushed me to, just follow whatever dream I had because they weren't able to follow theirs.
So you took to the drums. You had this really amazing band that was professional at this time, and I had read that you actually were still in high school when you got signed. Is that true?
That is, yeah. As a matter of fact, I was negotiating contracts, and I remember I was catching things in the agreement. I think when you're signing a contract and you're young, I was very concerned about what we were signing. And our first contract with Epic was 89 pages, if I remember correctly. And I went through every single page and made notes. And I was talking to our attorney on the phone saying, hey, what if this happens? What if this happens? And sometimes I would catch things that not even the attorneys would be thinking of. So, it was something that I was very concerned about, the business aspect of music. And so yes.
That's impressive, because I think that legal language feels like it's almost meant to trick people. I mean, I don't think it necessarily is, but how is it that you, I'm guessing were you about 17 at this point?
Yeah, I think I was 17 or 18,
yeah.
and you know, and I don't mean this in any, I'm not saying this in any type of, I don't want this to come off like I'm, you know, think something of myself or whatever, but I did do very well in school, and you know, I was pretty much like a straight A student, and I graduated high school at the age of 16. So I actually graduated early, and for me, you know, it was something that, you know, I was always concerned about business and the business aspect of the music business. And so you know, you hear all the horror stories growing up of, you know, this person that lost millions of dollars and the manager that stole, you know, from Billy Joel or whoever. And, you know, when you're young, you just want to try to make sure that you can avoid that as much as possible. So I was always cognizant of that and always examining the contracts very closely.
That's amazing. So you guys made an album. I think you recorded, I want to say 86, 87, you recorded like a smaller version of the album, right? And then about a year later, the full album came out?
We did an EP, I think it was 85. Okay. And we ended up, are you talking about the Fifth Angel record?
Yes, the first one.
Yeah. Self-titled. Okay. Yeah, that was my first album that I ever recorded. And funny enough, the producer on that was a gentleman named Terry Date. And he went on to record many famous albums from Soundgarden, Limp Bizkit, Deftones. So he actually went on to a massive career. And but that was his first record that he had ever done too.
Oh, wow.
So we were all kind of like learning in the studio, and we were all kind of like, you know, hey, let's try Exciter on cymbals, and let's try, you know, really compressing the stereo mix. And so we all were learning a lot about the whole process, you know, at that time. And Terry was a little older than us. I think he was about 10 years older than we were. But we started doing a demo with him. I think it was 85. Then we ended up getting signed to a smaller label called Shrapnel. Are you familiar with Shrapnel at all?
I know. I believe Phantom Blue were signed to them as well in their early days.
Yngwie was signed by Mike Varney at Shrapnel. Mike's a tremendous guy, and he heard something in the music that he liked, and he signed us. And then we ended up getting picked up by, at the time, it was a very small label called Roadrunner out of the Netherlands, and they had CBS distribution. Nowadays Roadrunner's one of the biggest metal labels on the planet. You know, they have Nickelback and Slipknot, and you know, it's a massive entity now. But back then, I remember talking to Cees Wessels on the phone, and you know, here I am, this kid, you know, and I'm talking to him about his distribution and stuff, and you know, trying to get to the bottom of what was happening with his company. And so anyways, it was a fun time because, you know, we were starting to get some activity. And then the next thing we knew, I guess we started making some real noise in Europe. And because of that, CBS, actually Epic Records in New York City, flew out to hear us rehearse and make sure we could play. And they signed the band, and we literally had not played one show as the band Fifth Angel. We had not played one show at all. And they signed the band, I think, just because of the strength of the album. And, you know, the album, I think, is a testament to, you know, some of the things I learned when I was young, which was, you know, you always try to do the absolute best at whatever you're doing. And we put a lot of effort into making that album as great as it could be. Now, you got to remember, back in that day, there was no Pro Tools. There was no Beat Detective. There was no auto tune. You know, you had to actually play and sing. And we were very young, but we were also very cognizant. You know, we did everything to a click track. You know, we wanted to craft a great album. And I think the fact that when it got picked up by Epic, all they had to really do is change the artwork and remaster the album, and then they put their logo on it and stuck it out the door. So that tells you, you know, hey, we did a pretty darn good job.
How do you feel about that album today, that first album?
I still look back on it with very fond memories. And as a matter of fact, it was just re-released by Metal Blade, I think 2 years ago. It's considered a metal classic in Europe. And, you know, I don't know about the United States. I don't think we quite received the accolades in the US that we did overseas. But just the fact that, you know, here it is, you know, 30 some years later, and people still care about that record. You know, I think it's a great testament to what we accomplished as very young men.
I would say so for sure. So you guys made another album. I have about 89 was probably the year that second album came up. And
Yep.
around that time, you actually started playing with the Alice Cooper band. And I'm wondering, how did your bandmates react to you having this other gig? Because back then, I don't remember anybody having like two gigs. Musicians were like in one band, and that was kind of it, right?
I like how you said back then. It was unusual, and actually, I started touring with Alice back in, ironically, '86, which is when the Fifth Angel album came out. I think one of the guys was going to school. He was going to the University of Washington at that point. I was always the youngest guy in the band, by the way. So they kind of had to make some decisions as far as what they were going to do. And with Fifth Angel, we kind of always decided. We thought coming from Seattle, Queensryche was they were a band that we watched, and when Queensryche started out, they didn't play clubs, they didn't tour. All they did was make a great EP, and then they got picked up by EMI, and the next thing we know, they're on tour with Dio and other, Metallica and playing, massive venues. And so Fifth Angel, we always had the mindset, we don't want to go play clubs, we want to actually start touring. And so we wanted to do the same, or actually, go by the same system that they sort of established, which was make a great album. The album comes out, gets some success, and then you're touring as a result of the success of your record. And that's what we were trying to do. So I don't think anybody really minded. I think there was maybe a little bit of stress because, the Alice tours lasted for a long time, and I ended up touring with Alice for, 3 years. So, I toured with them for 86, 87, and 88, and we did a record. I'm sure you're going to get to that probably in a second.
Yes, raise your fist and yell.
But with Fifth Angel, what I was doing on tour, and I told the guys, well, what I'll do is, back then, I mean, this is, this is pre-internet. Mm-hmm. That's how long ago that was. So if you were going to, for instance, be in a magazine or meet with journalists, or you actually had to, fly there and meet them. We couldn't do what we're doing right now, with a Zoom. So what my agreement with the band was, hey, I have to go do these Alice tours because, it's an incredible opportunity. And, Alice, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Alice Cooper, who's not going to do that, right? So, but I did say that, I will promote the band while I'm on tour. And so that's what I would do. We had our publicists set up, in different cities that we would go to. For instance, when I was in London, I would meet with the Kerrang staff and we'd talk about Fifth Angel. And so it was kind of a, I guess it was a little bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, it prevented us from touring, which at that point we really didn't care about anyways, because we didn't really want to play clubs. We were trying to get to the next level and be doing what Queensryche did and play, serious concerts with a major artist. And we weren't getting that opportunity yet to do that. So, we were still in the building stage, and I don't think anybody really minded the fact that I was out there trying to build what we were doing while I was touring with Alice.
So speaking of Alice, how did Alice find you?
Well, that's an interesting story as well. I was on tour. I was playing the Whiskey A Go-Go, which is a famous club in Los Angeles. Some of your listeners might not be familiar with it, but everybody has played the Whiskey A Go-Go. When I say everybody, I literally mean everybody. I'm talking about like Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Van Halen, Motley Crue. I mean, you name a band, and at some point they played the Whiskey A Go-Go. And so I was touring and playing with a guitarist named Randy Hansen, and he did a tribute to Hendrix. And I was playing the show there, and somebody that was working with Alice's management company came up and said, hey, we think you're, a great player. Would you like to come down and audition for Alice Cooper? Now, remember, I'm still very young. But the first question out of my mouth was, are you guys paying for, to fly people down? Because I lived in Seattle, and flying down was like I think it was a $350 ticket or something, which, at that time in my life was a lot of money. So they said, well, we're not flying people down, but if you want to fly yourself down, we'll hold a spot and you can, set up an audition. And I knew they were auditioning like 100 guys or something. So, I didn't think the odds were very good, but what I did is I applied everything I learned in Fifth Angel, which is whatever you're going to do it with excellence. They sent me 7 songs. They said, learn these songs. Well, you know what I did? I actually learned the songs. So, which, you'd be surprised how many people audition. I've been on the other end of the coin where, you're auditioning, trying to find band members, and people come in and you say, hey, learn these songs. They come in, they don't know one note of the song, and so, I always made sure that if I was going to walk into an audition, that I knew the material, I had it down. And so I walked in, and the guitarist, who's still a tremendous friend of mine, and we talk on the phone almost every day, a guy named Kane Roberts. We're actually doing a lot of production work together these days. But he was the musical director. And at that time, he wanted to tell me that, I had the gig. He's like, dude, I can't even think somebody is going to come in here and do better than that. Like, I just can't imagine it. But, we have another day of auditions, and, we can't cancel that out. So, I'd love to tell you have the gig, but, I can't say that yet. So for a day, I was kind of sitting on pins and needles and waiting for that phone call. And then the phone call came and said, hey, you got the gig. And it was, what can you say? I mean, it was such a huge, exhilarating experience to have that happen. And then, I went from playing, the biggest place I'd played before touring with Alice was about 3,000 seats. It was a famous theater up in Seattle called the Paramount. And, again, a place that everybody's played, Paramount Theater, very famous venue. The Police play there. I mean, everybody has played this venue, but that was the largest place I played. And then the 5th show I played with Alice, it was all of a sudden like, hey, kid, you're thrown into the pool. You better swim. But I was totally ready for it on the flip side. But our 5th show was live at Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, 22,000 people, sold out, and live broadcast on MTV in front of about 20 million more people. So it was definitely like I just went from, just playing, smaller places to all of a sudden you're in the whirlwind. It was totally amazing. And honestly, that was some of the most fun touring I've ever had in my life. The guys were great. Kip Winger was playing bass. Paul Taylor was playing keys. Kane was on guitar. Alice was amazing to work with. I look back on those days as because we were, very young, I think, it's always the most fun the first time you do something. And that was certainly the first time where it was really at that level. And wow, what a kick in the pants. It was really a blast.
Well, so you hit your goal of playing these huge venues, right? I mean, you did it with Alice, but you hit your goal very quickly as a very young person.
Yeah,
not play those, small clubs, but bigger, much bigger venues.
Sure. Well, the funny thing is when I was a kid, I was always, the first concert I ever saw was Kiss. Mm-hmm. And my mom let me go because an older friend took me to the show. And my mother was always encouraging me, she was always trying to, kind of, lead the way in that regard and go, yeah, go check out, these bands, go to these concerts. And I think I was, like 11 years old or something. And I saw Kiss and I was like, wow, I want to do that. That looks like fun. I think the second concert I ever saw was Rush. And, what an experience that was. That was another just, like, what the heck is this, and who's that drummer, like, what is going on? And,
right.
That was another one of those, like, hey, awakening, I guess, type of moments. But now I even forgot the question. I don't know.
No, that's okay. You pretty much answered it. I think what I did want to know, though, is Alice was already a legend. Alice Cooper's already a legend. He had already done big things with the original, Alice Cooper band. But sure. I know that when you and Kane and Kip and everyone came in, there was a lot of pressure to make sure that Alice stayed great and legendary, but this time doing metal. Did you feel that pressure, or was that pressure a little bit more on Kane being like the creative and musical director?
Well, I think everybody wanted it to be successful. And to be totally honest with you, nobody knew that it was going to be as big and successful as it was. I mean, even Shep Gordon, Kane told me the story when he was talking to Shep, and Shep couldn't, he just didn't understand. Something was going on. Alice had been gone kind of, I think, for about 6 or 7 years. And I think people were just really ready for him to make a big entrance, a big re-entrance onto the scene. And so I think it just hit, at just the right time. I don't think we really felt the pressure. Obviously Alice is totally legendary, but I think we all, understood that. And I think, we were all doing our best to bring what we could to the show and to try to make it exciting. But honestly, with Alice, an Alice type show, I mean, the pressure is kind of on Alice to a large degree. I mean, he's really the focal point, and there's a lot of different theatrical things that are going on stage. I mean, yes, you have to play your parts and you have to do them well. But, I think by the time we got into the tour, especially by the time we got into, after a few weeks on the tour, we knew the song so well, you could play them in your sleep. So, I don't think there was really so much pressure on us as there probably was on maybe Shep Gordon and the management team. I think for us, we were having a great time. We were having fun. We weren't that worried about it. I mean, as far as we just knew something big was happening. I mean, that was the other thing too, is Shep said, well, we don't know how long this is going to go. We booked this many dates, and we're just going to see how it goes. And then all of a sudden the tour ended up being almost a year long. So it's something that I don't even, they weren't even expecting it to be as big as it was. I mean, it was pretty much sold out Coliseums, all over the US, all over Europe, all over Canada. And, it was a tremendous thing to be attached to, that's for sure.
So let's talk about Raise Your Fist and Yell. What was that like for you in the studio with Alice, Kane, Kip, and the gang?
It was a blast. And that was the first time I'd really worked with Michael Wagner, who again is a lifelong friend and a wonderful man. He taught me most of what I know about audio production and recording, and what a tremendous experience. Working on Raise Your Fist and Yell was really a dream come true. It was fantastic working with Kane, Kip, and Alice. And we really had an opportunity, I think, to create something that wasn't really being directed in terms of, there wasn't somebody going, well, you need to do this or you need to do this. It was like, Kane came in with some amazing songs with that, Alice and Kane came in with some great songs. And then it was kind of like, they kind of let me loose a little bit, like if you listen to the beginning of Lock Me Up, or you listen to Freedom or Roses on White Lace, we were very happy to lay down some chops and put some energy and maybe a little bit of excess into the music. So.
Well, I mean, the 80s was all about excess, so thank God for that. I miss that, to be honest. Do you miss the excess part, or is it kind of like been there, done that, glad to have moved on?
No, I mean, I think the 80s, it was a magical time. And then maybe it's just because I was really young. I mean, maybe you always look back on your youngest days as the most exciting and the most energetic or whatever. I don't know if that's the case, but I just know that when you went to a concert back then, the crowds were out of their freaking minds. I mean, they were just nuts. And it was like, and they were nuts the whole show, and they were just there to have a good time. And, that's something that, I do notice, like in Europe, when we play festivals, that's the same spirit that I see in those places. Like we played Wacken, and we played Into the Grave, and we played Bang Your Head, and some of these different festivals. And, people are genuinely there to just have a good time and enjoy the music. And the 80s, that's all it was about. People were just there to have a great time and enjoy the music. And what a great era to be part of. I mean, I loved the era. I mean, I love touring today too. I mean, touring today is amazing as well. It's just, there was something special about that era, just in terms of the crowd responses. I just think that they were just so over the top and having a great time that couldn't help but influence you having a great time.
Right, definitely. So at some point you did leave Alice Cooper Band. How did that come about, and was it your choice to leave?
Yeah, it was. You know, Alice, working with Alice was incredible. And, you know, I still do a lot of work at his foundation that's in Phoenix. I live in Phoenix. He lives in Phoenix. And, you know, he's a wonderful man. I loved Alice. I loved Shep. If I'm going to be 100% honest, there were some other people within the organization that I think tried to, I think they were worried a little bit about the original, like, I guess the original band. I guess there was some, you know, some things that happened that were kind of problematic, I guess. I mean, this is what I'm thinking. And I think that there were some people within the organization that, you know, I think in their minds, they were trying to protect Alice. And I think, but what they kind of made clear to us is, you know, hey, this isn't, you know, this isn't your home, so to speak. And, you know, they kind of made us feel like, well, you know, you got a gig, but, you know, you know, we'll see what happens next year. And so if you look at everybody that was in that band, you know, Kip went on to do Winger, I went on to do House of Lords, Kane got signed to Geffen and did his own records. I think, you know, that, and again, I don't, it wasn't Shep or Alice that made us feel this way, but there were people, excuse me, people that were behind the scenes that kind of made you feel like, you know, hey, this is, you know, this isn't, you know, don't get too comfortable. You know, playing with Alice is, you know, obviously a dream come true, and I enjoyed it. I did it for 3 years. But, you know, again, with some of the people in that organization, which, by the way, are no longer in that organization, which is interesting, because now they have had a band that's lasted in there for, you know, I think 10 years plus. And I think that's a testament to some of these people not being there anymore, to be honest with you. But anyway, yeah, after that, I joined House of Lords, and actually worked very closely with Gene Simmons, who, you know, that was the first concert I ever went to, was Kiss. And, you know, just working with Gene, and, you know, where Gene's all of a sudden at our photo sessions and maybe at some of our TV appearances and in the studio with us, you know, it was a very surreal, you know, kind of experience. I mean, it was one of those things where you're like, that's weird. This guy that was on my poster when I was a kid is now in the studio with us. So it was really cool.
Was he there more to guide you and support you and just kind of see what was happening? Or did he give you guys specific feedback on, you know, what he thought you guys should be doing?
Well, I think Gene was awesome in terms of, you know, he musically, I think, sort of let us, you know, he kind of like said, let her rip, you know, because I think House of Lords was a band of sort of, it was one of the, what I would say is one of the first sort of like quote unquote super groups, you know, that was put together. I mean, you had, you know, I was coming from Alice Cooper, you had Chuck Wright that came from Quiet Riot, you had Greg, who came from Angel and Jafria. You had Lanny, who played with Ozzy Osbourne, and I think Black Sabbath, or some other things that he had worked on that were pretty major. And then you had an unknown singer named James Christian. You know, nobody knew who this guy was. And so it was a little bit of one of those weird, you know, super group, I guess, you know, I guess you could say it, you know, assembling sort of like a super group. And I auditioned for that band too. And it was pretty funny because Matt Sorum was another one of the guys that auditioned, and he ended up in Guns N' Roses, and I ended up in House of Lords. So I don't know if he ever wants to trade. I'll be happy to just trade with him.
Well, you've had all the dream gigs, but one that probably got you more eyes was one that I didn't expect to find when I was researching you, and that is the show Full House, the legendary show Full House that everybody's seen, no matter whether they say they've seen it or not. And I was surprised to find out that you were in 3 episodes. But then I realized what the 3 episodes were. It made sense. You were in Uncle Jesse's band.
I was part of Jesse and the Rippers. As a matter of fact, I was there for the formative years that made Jesse and the Rippers who Jesse and the Rippers are. I was there.
So how did that come about?
Video on MTV. I was there for the Disney World finale, and I was there for prom night. So I was there for all of the things that made Jesse and the Rippers a household name.
That is amazing. So how did you get that gig?
Well, it's a funny story. John Stamos is a drummer, and he's also friends with Lanny, the original guitar player in House of Lords. And John, I believe, saw us play at the Palace Theater in Los Angeles when House of Lords headlined there. And he saw me playing, and he said, hey, we got to have you on the show sometime. And you always think he's just saying something, and then next thing I knew, Lanny's like, hey, John wants you to come on the show. And so I ended up on 3 episodes. That was another amazing experience. And what's funny is when I was on that show, it was the #1 television show in the United States. And I forget what the viewing audience was. I think more people saw me on that show than saw me on everything else combined, because they had just a massive viewing audience. So it's kind of funny to think of, I've toured with Alice and I've done all these things, and probably more people saw me on Full House than anything else.
Listen, never underestimate Uncle Jesse and Uncle Jesse's band, Jesse and the Rippers. Everyone should check out that video. It is still easy to find on YouTube. So they should definitely check it out. All right. So you've been in so many bands, and I feel like I'm rushing through your career, and I don't mean to, but there's some other really interesting things that you've done in your career that I want to talk about. And one of them is being a record executive for a company called VSR Music Group.
Yeah.
So when did you start working as the president of VSR Music Group?
Yeah, that's a company that was distributed through Capitol, and that came into existence really, I think, in 2008, 2009 is when we started distributing some serious product.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get that gig?
Well, it's interesting. I have a recording studio called Sonic Fish Productions, and it's in a building that's actually in the back of a church called Living Word. And I'm very good friends with, at the time, he was the CFO at the church, and also a singer, and they had a band called Resound. And so I had produced the album, and they were looking for distribution. And I'm trying to remember exactly. I think it started as a joke, because they were looking for a distributor. And I think I called some friends of mine in Nashville, and some of these guys wanted like $100,000 a year, to be a consultant and try and get a distribution deal. And I think I sent an email that said, well, hey, why don't I just do it? And ha ha. And then my friend wrote back. He goes, well, are you serious? And I thought about, well, maybe I am serious. I go, every man needs a war, so I took that on and actually assembled a presentation, and, we met with Capitol, and next thing I knew, I was, in boardroom meetings, talking to, boardrooms of 30 people at a time, telling them about the potential for the company. And we ended up, signing a distribution deal. So that's how that started.
So VSR is your company?
No, it's actually owned by Living Word. So it's not my company. It's just something I helped direct. So
did they make you officially ask you to be the president after they saw that you were able to help them get distribution? And
yes, they did. Yeah. I was on staff for about 10 years. And I think, sort of what happened, I think, with VSR is what happened with a lot of companies where, let's face it, with streaming, and, once streaming really hit, which was probably, I'm going to say, maybe 5 years ago, that really cut into the profit margin for, for artists, for labels, for, everybody. I mean, streaming, I know it's great for the fans and they can listen to anything, anytime they want, but for the artists and for the producers and managers, it's kind of a nightmare, because you're just making, you're making pennies where you used to make dollars. And it's very difficult to continue in a business if you're not making money at it. So we've kind of scaled back, and I stepped back, and there's some other people that are running that now. But I think running a record company now, it's a very difficult prospect at this point. Let's put it that way.
So you've always been business minded, clearly, since you were very young, but was being in the official role as president, as a label, did you see things that you hadn't been aware of before as a musician fending for yourself?
Well, I think, you start to understand the business as a business, and you start understanding, maybe a little more so than you do when you're a musician. I think when you're a musician, you certainly understand that you're in a business. But I think when you're running a label, all of a sudden you understand, you know, instead of just looking at the quality of a band, you might start looking at the impact of a band. Instead of just going, hey, these guys are great musicians with great songs. Now you're going, okay, but what's their digital impact? You know, what kind of reach do they have in the marketplace? What's their fan base? You know, how many live shows are they playing? Like, there's a lot of business considerations that you're thinking about, as opposed to just thinking about the music and the band. So I think it does make you a little more acutely aware of what's necessary to be successful in the marketplace.
And when you were at the label, what were the things that you were looking for? So for example, if there are musicians watching now and you were still the president of that label,
Sure.
what is it that you're looking for, and what do they need to hear from you?
Well, I think the important thing is, you know, you have to have some sort of groundwork. Like the things that I was looking for as a label, you know, I would be looking for artists that have already that are being artists because they're going to be an artist with or without the company. Like, you know, you're looking for somebody that's going to do it with or without VSR, or with or without any other company. And that has to be something that they're driven personally, and they want to be successful, and they love making music, and they love making art, and they love the whole, everything that is encompassed in that process. So I think it makes you look at it from there, you know, in terms of, you're just looking for somebody that has already laid a lot of the groundwork, and all you have to do is come alongside what they're doing and enhance it and give it some extra, you know, put some extra fuel in the tank and press the pedal a little further down. But basically they're already up and running. You're just trying to, you know, basically boost them and give them some rocket power, so to speak.
And what specifically did you see in some of the artists that you signed, aside from that determination? Were there things like songs,
Yeah. Oh.
technical ability,
Yes.
or it factor?
Well, there's all of those things, you know, and my wife and I just watched a documentary on Clive Davis, and Clive Davis was just all about the song. I mean, it was all about the song. And he's exactly right. I mean, because, you know, you can have all of the other things. You can be a great artist, you can be charismatic and compelling, but the bottom line is you're going to need at some point a song delivery. You know, I think about some of the most compelling artists that we've seen in our generation. You know, when you think of some of the newer impactful stars, you know, even like a Lady Gaga. Okay, yeah, she had all this visual stuff going on. It was very interesting and very compelling, but she also had some tremendous material, and she's a fabulous singer, you know. So, you know, it's like you're looking for all of those things. I mean, obviously, you know, if you can find something where all of the cylinders in the car are firing, you know, that's what you're looking for.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people have been in this position where they truly do have great music. They truly have great songs, but for some reason, they don't get quite the accolades or the attention that they deserve. Was there something that you figured out in that role, or even as a musician all these years, that you can do to help yourself along, especially with all the tools that we have now with social media? Is there something that a legitimate musician who truly has solid songs and all, you know, all the things that they need to be successful but isn't quite getting it, is there something that you can offer them in terms of advice?
Well, I think the advice is, you know, you have to write music that I think moves you, you know, and I think about this as an artist, you know, because, you know, I'm still working obviously on the artist side very heavily as well. And so when I'm writing songs, I always think about, well, do I care about this? Does this move me? Does this speak to me? Does it say something? Because if it doesn't, and it doesn't move you, why should it move anybody else? And so I think that that's a very important thing for artists to understand, that, you know, they need to be passionate about music that makes them feel something. And if it makes you feel something, then chances are it's going to make somebody else feel something. But I think you're also asking me about the business side. Is that right? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, is there something that they can do? Because I can imagine, I think in, you know, reading and watching interviews for years and years, there are a lot of bands out there that were really great bands, but they never got to that like next level of some of those bigger bands that you saw in the magazines constantly, that were always on MTV and so on and so forth. They have a lot more tools these days, but is there a way that they can use them to inch up a little bit, or are we still all trying to figure out what that is?
Well, I think to some degree, everybody's still trying to figure it out. I mean, I always make the comment, I mean, even Clive Davis, it's like if he could have, he would have put out a platinum record every day, and he, he had misses. He had times where he missed, and I always think of Mutt Lange, excuse me, a producer who, I'd love to have lunch with someday and pick that guy's brain, because that guy not only made, huge records, he made the biggest records of all time, Foreigner 4, AC/DC, Back in Black, all the Def Leppard catalog. And then he went to go kick country, with Shania Twain, biggest female country artist ever. So, I think, somebody knows something, and I think if you get into it, it really is about the song. But on the business side of things, I think the thing you can do, if you really feel that you have the songs and you really feel like you have the talent, the great thing about today is, now there's the internet, and now you've got social media, and now you can try and develop your followers. And that's a lot of times what labels are looking for now. I think there's an artist I read about, probably about a year ago. I forget what her name was, but, it was like a 16-year-old gal that had 2 million followers on YouTube.
Lindsay Sterling?
I'm not sure it was her. It might have been.
I know that she was one that just blew up.
She's the one who got like a $500,000 deal, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's not.
I'm not sure about that. I just know that I didn't know who she was, and then all of a sudden she was doing songs with everybody, including Lizzie Hale.
Well, you stuff like Billie Eilish, and she just started writing songs with her brother, and they started putting them on the internet, and next thing you know, they had millions of followers. And that's what, our label's looking for that. Yes. It's a very obvious thing. If you have, if you're already kind of exploding, then all they have to do is just come along beside you and enhance what you're doing. And that's why, those are some of the artists that are getting signed. So are there things you can do? Yeah. Is it easy to do? No, it's not. I mean, I think of that band. Do you remember that band, OK Go?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a band that nobody knew anything about. And all of a sudden they did a video about treadmills. And, next thing you knew, it was, Grammy nominated and, video awards and everything you can think of. And you go, that was all based on a video about treadmills. So, if you can figure it out, that's, you're looking for something like that, where, it's in this generation where everybody's attention span is like 2 seconds, and they're always looking for the next, thing. Okay, here's, these are cats, jumping off a house or whatever it is, they're always looking for something. And if you can capture that, I call it, catching lightning in a bottle. If you can do that, then yeah, that's going to help your career. Can I tell you how to do it? No, I can't, because it's a very difficult thing to do.
Is it still worth signing with a label if you're that artist that's already so big and you're smart enough to figure out how to put your songs out there and get people to pay you directly? Is it still worth signing with a label? Are they still able to do something for you that you can't do for yourself?
Absolutely. And that's the thing that people don't understand. They think a label, oh, what's a label going to do? They're just going to put me on, whatever. A label has a lot of value still, because they have relationships that they've built over, 60, 70 years. When you're working with Warner Brothers, or you're working with, Capital or some major company, you're not only working with that company, you really, what you're working with are all their relationships that they've established. For instance, if you're taking something to radio yourself, and try it, go down to your local radio station and say, hey, I'm this artist. Would you like to play this? I can guarantee you're not going to get past the receptionist, but I guarantee you, if the promotion, the radio promoter for Warner Brothers walks in there and has a meeting with the program director, you may not get played, but the chances of you getting played are increased by about 100,000. So like I said, you could try it yourself and see what happens. There's no question. Does a label help? Absolutely. If it's a big enough company and they have enough established relationships, they can help you on a lot of levels that people tend to not think about now.
Well, you've been balancing throughout your career, playing music, playing in multiple bands, being a record exec, you have your own studio. How are you able to manage all of those things? Do you do everything at once, or do you put things to the side so you could concentrate on one thing at a time?
Well, it's a great question, and sometimes it gets a little chaotic. Sometimes you are dealing with multiple situations in one day. Where and I call them. Sometimes you're putting out fires. Sometimes you're a fireman, and this has to be taken care of, and and this has to be taken care of. But by and large, I've been able to sort of pace everything out to a large degree, and I guess compartmentalize is a good way to put it. I have a lot of other different companies too. I work in real estate. I've been married for over 30 years. So there's a lot of different demands and a lot of different things that can take up your time very rapidly. And so, you do have to be efficient. You have to compartmentalize. You have to organize. You have to, like I have an Excel spreadsheet, which says this is what I'm doing. We're doing this, and this today, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people look at that like, oh, it's horrible. I wouldn't want to, live my life like that. But if you care about what you're doing and you're passionate about it and you want to accomplish something, being organized is a big help.
So what is it that you've been working on now? You're in Flotsam and Jetsam. You have your studio. So what have you been doing this past year while we've all been socially distancing? And what do we have to look forward to?
Well, Flotsam and Jetsam has a new album. We've been doing a lot of recording in this time is what we've been doing. And so we have a new album that's coming out in, I believe, June. I believe it's June 4th. You'll have to double check me on that date, but it's a record that we're very proud of. It's a very aggressive and I would say somewhat angry album. It's probably a lot different than my personality in this interview, but it is a record that, it's the best way to describe Flotsam and Jetsam to me is, you've got 5 guys in cars lined up and, everybody is pedal to the metal, full blast, the whole album. There's actually there is sort of a ballady song on the album. There's one, and everything else is just, you've got 5 guys putting in as much muscle and aggression and chops and excitement into the music as possible. It's a very exciting record. It's a very angry record. But I think it is something that we're very proud of in terms of the music itself. I think in my opinion, it's probably, if not the strongest album that Flotsam has put out, it's definitely one of them. I mean, it's a very powerful record, and I hope the fans are going to like it. I mean, we did follow our own advice. We made music that moved us first, and hopefully it moves a bunch of other people too. And I guess we're going to find out shortly if that's the case.
Right. And then my last question for you, and my next to last question, is that Kane had actually been on as well. Sure. And he had said something to me at some point about like you, Kip, and him doing something. Is there any possibility of the 3 of you doing something
together? The great thing about nowadays, just like you mentioned, the other guys in Flotsam have different things that are going on. Steve is working on one of his projects. The bass player has a band called Contrarian. So everybody is always doing multiple projects now that you mentioned before. Nowadays it's a little bit different time. So it's absolutely possible that we'll get together and do something. Nobody's asked me. I think Kane asked me a few months ago. He said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing something?" I was like, "Absolutely. If you guys want to do something, I'll be right there." And also, I guess another possibility on the horizon, I have been talking with Greg Giuffria, who was the keyboardist, obviously, in Angel and House of Lords. And he's putting together a new Giuffria record. And it appears that Dean Castronova is going to be singing. And I'll be playing drums. And Craig Goldie is going to be playing guitar. And Chuck Wright from Quiet Riot is going to be playing bass. And Greg's going to be doing keyboards. So it looks like there's a project on the horizon there. I've been sent a bunch of the demos, and we're going to see if that, you always hate to say anything before it actually,
in case it doesn't happen. Yeah.
his doesn't happen, but it sure looks like it's going to happen. So that's another project that's on the horizon. But we did finish a couple of videos with Flotsam. Those should be coming out very shortly. We're very excited about this album, and we're just hoping that we're able to go out and play. We had an entire year worth of dates canceled. And somebody just texted me this morning and said Wacken is sold out, which I don't know if that's a rumor or what the deal is, because as far as I know, Germany is still closed down. They're still locked down. So I don't know how that's even possible, but we had all of our summer festivals were canceled. So we're just waiting to see, what's going to happen and if we're going to be able to play towards the end of the summer or in the fall. And we're certainly hoping to get back out there and say hello to the fans.
Yeah, I think we are all looking forward to that whenever it happens. And I think we just have to wait and see, just buy those tickets and then hope that we can actually go to the venue and see those shows.
Yep.
Yep. And so my last question for you, even though you've already offered really great advice, is there something else that you would love either your fellow drummers or just other musicians to know, people who are trying to pursue this career in music and maybe hope to have a career like yours? What would you share with them, or what would you advise them?
Well, I think the important thing is if you love it and you're passionate about it, and then you have to follow it. If you're really not passionate about it, I would say don't do it, because that's the other thing. A lot of people are kind of in the middle, and they kind of do music because they think they like it. I mean, I've worked with artists that they told me, oh yeah, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, and then they're out of the business, and like 2 months later, and you just go, well, what happened? And so if you love it and you're passionate about it, I think you have to follow it. And I think my advice would be, you have to create something that people are going to attach to. And I'll give you a for instance, like nowadays you can look on Instagram, and I have, and there's some musicians doing some great things. Like there's some guitarists that they just, they'll play their instrumental solos and they write the music and they'll post it on Instagram, and they have, 1 million followers, on Instagram. And it's not about a band, and it's not about an album. I mean, this is just them as solo artists. So whatever it is that you're going to create, is it a band? Are you a solo artist? What kind of music are you going to make? I think it does have to revolve around music, obviously, but there are, as we talked about, there's other factors too. But I think, you have to create something that people are going to attach to. And so whatever that is, do it. And then that's the other thing that I could tell you too. There's a lot of people I know that, they go to school for this or that, or they go to school for engineering or producing or, drumming or whatever, whatever you're going to go to school for. And, at the end of the day, yeah, school can be a good experience, and you can gain knowledge and you can learn some things from that experience. But ultimately, you have to get out and do it. I mean, I know it sounds like a Nike ad, an old Nike ad, but you do have to. You have to get out and just make things happen and do things. That would be my advice. And then the last thing I would say is, not only do you have to do them, but you have to do them. I think you have to do them with excellence. And I'm going to give you a funny story that my whole career may have hinged on this one thing. I think I've told this in one other interview, but when I was a kid, and I would go into Guitar Center, there would be these things that were tacked up on the bulletin board, drummer looking for band, or, band looking for drummer, or guitarist seeking singer, or whatever. So when I was a kid, I made this 8x10 black and white, photo. It was basically it had all these little images of me playing live, and it said, pro drummer seeks pros, and and it looked really professional, and it had my contact information on it. It was like 8x10, and it looked for back in that day, it was really cool. And so I stuck that on the bulletin boards at Guitar Center, back when I was a teenager, and nothing had really happened yet. And Randy Hansen called me because of that flyer. Now think of it. If Randy Hansen didn't call me, then I'm not touring, playing the Whiskey A Go-Go. I'm not seeing the people that worked with Alice's management company. I'm not on tour with Alice Cooper. So did my entire career depend on that 8x10 thing of me saying pro drummer seeks pros? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I did that with excellence so that I stood out among all the stuff that was stuck on that bulletin board, and somebody called me. So whatever you're going to do it with excellence.
Fantastic. Well, it has been a great honor to talk to you. Your career is beyond impressive, and I know you're going to do more amazing stuff this coming year, but thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks, Sarah. It's an honor being here, and really enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.